What's up, everybody, and welcome to another video. I'm Rich Wilson, founder and filmmaker at Vibe Media, where we help your brand build to an influencer level online presence using filmmaking tools and tips to tell your story. We've got another episode of Vibe Check for you today, and in this episode, we're talking about the future of filmmaking. Some of the future tools that we are seeing are coming ahead more and more. We're talking VR, we're talking about 3D, we're talking about just the great technology that, video walls, green screen is going to be probably obsolete in the near future as these incredible LED backgrounds are becoming more and more prevalent in studios across the industry. So we're talking about that and a lot more about these great new technologies. So let's just sit back and get on with the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to Vibe Check, the show for filmmakers and film enthusiasts. I'm Rich Wilson, founder and filmmaker at Vibe Media. We have Dana, our client relations and content producer.
Yes.
And also Forrest, cinematographer, DP, and Pokemon trainer.
Still in effect. Pokemon Go every day.
Yes. Indeed. Boom.
Nerds.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, we are going to talk about, filmmaking, usually, right? But we're going to talk about 3D in filmmaking and in films and kind of touch on some of the new technology that we have now and then also how it's kind of developed over the last couple of decades. So 3D in movies. Actually, 3D in movies date back to, even in the earliest times of earliest decades of filmmaking. You've got the 3D glasses with the red and the blue, right? And we've come a long way since then. But yeah,
IMAX.
The IMAX. Yeah, the glasses look a little different now. It's not red and blue anymore, but
they're cool, Men in Black shades.
Yeah, right. Very, very futuristic. So, 3D in movies. What's your takes on 3D in movies? What do you like it? Sometimes, do you not like it? What do you think?
So, this is hard for me because I like anime and that's 2D. So going one step up, 3D. It's I should like that, but I don't. I'm not a fan of it. I think I haven't really been a fan of it since probably Spy Kids came out.
Good use of 3D though.
Yeah,
right?
Great use of 3D.
Right.
Oh,
Shark
I was
Boy, Lava Girl.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I think 3D is really only meant to be used when its main purpose in a film is to be 3D, in those Spy Kids films. But then you have films that forcefully throw in these moments, oh goodness, I don't even think I could think of any.
My Bloody Valentine.
Yes.
3D.
Yeah, where they just it doesn't even seem like it's oh cool, whatever.
Yeah.
3D in films and definitely work well in a lot of the attractions. When you go to some amusement parks and they have some attractions when now in 3D or whatever, that totally works. It makes sense. You get the little jump scares and whatnot. It's great. Or the old Honey, I Shrunk the Kids experience at
A Bug's Life.
Yeah, A Bug's Life.
Oh yes, I love those 4D rides.
Right,
those are the best.
Yeah, see, now those make sense. But I tend to agree. There's sometimes the 3D in movies definitely work. Most of the time, I feel like they don't. Because if you're trying to watch a movie that you're not watching the 3D version of it, then it's just
very awkward reaches at the screen.
It is some of the earlier Marvel movies.
Yeah.
Right. You've got Thor and Captain America. Some of the sequences in those, they were in 3D, but there were only a couple sections that were in 3D. It just didn't make any sense.
Just paid an extra $6 and got a headache for no reason.
Right. And then when you're not watching it in 3D, you have the obvious, motion or scene in Captain America where he's throwing his shield towards the screen. Obviously, that was for the 3D effect. Going, oh, I almost got hit by the shield. I don't like that. I don't like that.
I think, there's a fine line between using it, obviously, for the gimmick of using 3D, and then using it and still making a movie that stands by itself. I could think of two perfect examples of a 3D film. Avatar, when that came out here, Avatar was a 3D film.
Yeah, that's right.
But it does still look fine without the 3D. So it's not reliant on as much of the jump, like, out at you aspect. It's more like 3D was a cool thing if you had it because of all the floating,
little spectral
seeds
things
and whatever.
Yeah.
So that worked, and even on 2D plane it works.
Well, I think that's one of those movies because they also incorporate CGI into it. It's really easy to get away with that. Because that movie was essentially made for IMAX theaters when they first were like officially rolled out. So obviously they're going to be smart about where they incorporate 3D stuff into it and where, like, you can actually watch it at home and they can still make money off of it watching it at home. But yeah, like I agree. Like I think that makes it really beautiful. Like it really puts you into those scenes sometimes too when you're just like, oh wow, like I can get these little
when it's creating like an environment or even bringing some depth. Few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, they did they re-released Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, and they said now in 3D. I went and saw it. There's nothing that jumped out of the screen. It went just in, and it created more depth.
Yeah.
Which I loved. I'm like, this is what 3D is supposed to be like. It should be, where you're watching it and you see that depth rather than, it just being on one plane.
In the front, yeah.
Boom. Like, oh, you see them walking through the palace and it looks like you can see the other end of the palace because you could see that, that space. It was incredible.
Yeah, but then that kind of starts turning more into like the VR feeling of things, creating that depth where you can actually like feel like you're there in that same room with them.
Right.
Whereas 3D, like I feel like now, besides that one movie, it's always just been like, oh, let me throw stuff at you, let me get you freaked out.
There's another one I was going to bring up is the re-release of A Christmas Carol. Or I'm not a Christmas Carol. Maybe it is. Yeah, with Jim Carrey.
Yeah, the Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Carol.
Yeah. See,
and that was actually, it looks good without the 3D as well, but like it helps so much with the 3D, just little tiny bits. And I think because it's a CGI movie, that's something you can get away with a little bit.
Because you can do different things with the animation within it. You can give the flames like different types of shading to it, so it feels more like you're right there, and you can almost feel like the heat from it.
Again, I think as a society, I don't know about you guys, but I think we have gone way past the era of like the 3D jumping out stuff. Like,
because it was a gimmick back then.
And it was also really hard to do, and it cost a lot of money.
Yes, well, even within like the last decade with some of the movies who have still done that, if you actually even notice, like none of the new Marvel movies since like Avengers has been like real 3D, that I'm aware of, like at least the last like 5 or 6 movies not in 3D.
Yeah, I don't think they focus on 3D anymore. Like I said, I feel like now it's really just the IMAX experience, giving you like the Dolby Vision with like the sound and.
I think we're past the whole, we're going to jump out at you at screen, whoa, kind of thing. It's like, no, let's create the environment. Let's dive deep into it. Let's create that depth. And it brings me into the story more because now it feels like I'm just sitting in, the living room watching them, or in a throne room watching the action happen.
But like I said, that's where VR kind of comes in, because then you're not really getting a 3D experience anymore. You're getting a virtual reality feel if you're actually feeling like you're a part of that, world.
It's kind of bridging that gap a little bit. So, and you know what, it might be even one step into having movies going full VR. That we're probably still a few decades probably away from that kind of film. Like we still see it in some filmmaking. Like Ready Player One was filmed all in the virtual world. You had some of these other movies done virtually, like Lion King. The new release of Lion King was all done virtually as well.
So I think filming it in a virtual reality world makes sense because you can have depth of computer graphics, all that stuff. But experiencing it in virtual reality is a different thing.
I think
Oh, yeah.
that's still
I think
little while away.
I don't even think films will ever really adapt to that. I think you can do short experiences. Like I went to an art exhibit that had a virtual reality exhibit where they created like an actual loop VR thing that happened or an experience there, but it wasn't anything that I would necessarily do a whole like movie on, because again, the whole point of movies is to focus your attention on a specific story.
Yeah.
So if it's VR and there's too much going on, or you're missing something because you're looking a different way, then that ignores the entire point of the movie.
But then, okay, so what about Time Code? That movie's shot in 4 different sequences, and you can actually click on them and watch different ones. And it's the same thing that you're arguing of, oh, you're going to miss a part of the story if you're focusing on one section versus another. You can just go back in the VR stuff and rewatch it. And then you also think of things like Bandersnatch, where it is an interactive movie. You get to choose the outcome, however many there are. And then there's like Bear Grylls' Man vs. Wild experience on Netflix that you can like actually get to be a part of. I don't think it's too far off, you know.
I still think it's just, even with those though, the difference is you're still working on a 30-degree angle, whatever, your vision angle of like a flat screen. Whereas when you start introducing 360 degrees and somebody could literally be in a movie like this the whole time, and they're missing everything that's going on.
Well,
over here,
that's when it becomes limitations, because when you're doing VR stuff, you have to be centered up with everything. It's not always
But
full
is that
360.
true VR?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
I've done the full actual VR games, and there's never anything behind you. And if there is, it like doesn't register it, and you have to go back and focus on what's happening up at the front. Like, it's not like you can just turn around and focus on other things. Whatever's happening on screen will just stop until you refocus.
Honestly, I think at some point we could get to that point.
We absolutely
Like
can.
we may actually, they may film something in well, you got VR, maybe even holographic
Look
technology.
at how they filmed Mandalorian. That was in an entire
true.
blue screen room.
Actually, it was all LED screens.
Or whatever, yeah.
So the volume, how Mandalorian does it, it's absolutely amazing. They call it the volume. It is just this big dome full of LED screens, and they just build like a very simple set in the middle where all the action's happening, and then everything else they just create the environment, and it's incredible what they can do, because they can create the depth.
They can track it with the cameras.
And they
track it
can
with
literally
camera.
take that
Yes.
same technology and that same ideas and incorporate it into VR.
Yeah.
That's basically VR. It's just on your screen already. You're not wearing the goggles.
Well, it's funny because they've actually worked with some of the big like game engines to create
Like Oculus
that. Yeah, like to create that volume, and to like if you watch some of the behind the scenes of Mandalorian, you see Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau looking at stuff with VR technology. Same thing with, like I said, Ready Player One. You'd never think in a million years would you see Steven Spielberg sitting there with a visor on and directing a movie in the virtual world.
I just don't. My thing is VR is such an expensive thing to get into, because just one, like a solid good VR system runs like $300 to $500, and you also need like a good gaming computer, and there's so many other things that go into it besides how you film it. It's just not realistic for production companies to put like all of their eggs in one basket and make something solely VR when maybe like not even 10% of the population has access to VR stuff in America.
Well, I know you had mentioned some of the interactivity that I was talking about with like Time Code, Bandersnatch, all those things. I understand where you're coming from on that, but the basics of film as an art form in general is that it is a very voyeuristic art form. It's not designed to be because even within those choices, you have Bandersnatch where you have choices, but they're pre-programmed choices.
What's more voyeuristic than being in the actual scene?
But that's being a part of it. That's actually being a part of it.
But you're not interacting with it. You're just watching it.
Yeah, but then I guess the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that even within those choices, like you can fake the perception that you have control over what you're looking at, but it is still pre-scripted. It's still something that you don't have control over. And I think VR, the purpose of VR, especially when you're dealing with video games, things of that nature, the reason it's implemented so well in video games is because it's in an interactive medium that requires interaction. video games by nature are interactive, whereas movies are non-interactive.
Not always. And
Like-
the only reason I know this is because I actually worked Oculus. I've worked on their releases. I've played through all of their games. I know what's on the market, and it's not really a lot, and it's not really interactive. A lot of the stuff that is out there is like visual novels. You're already kind of going through something that's pre-scripted out.
Right.
And even in a video game, no matter what you choose, no matter what you interact with,
still
it's
scripted,
going
but-
to be scripted.
Right.
So even then, like, that doesn't, you know,
But
I still think
They've tried to do it with like Breath of the Wild, though. And Breath of the Wild is a great example of a game that literally you create your own. Like, yes,
Yeah.
it's the
You
same
create your own
overall
adventure.
story, but like
Yeah.
the way to get to that
I
is
guess-
shaped by
Yes.
everything else you do.
Let me-
Whereas-
Which I will tell you, at the beginning of playing that game, I didn't like it because I'm huge Zelda fan, and I love the journey of going to point A to point B. Oh, the reason why I need to go to the forest temple is because of this, which leads to the fire temple. And then the stuff I get in those temples helps me in the spirit temple later, or the dark temple, or whatever, right? But with Breath of the Wild, it's just like, oh no, once you go through the first, like couple of hours of the game,
you
up to
could literally get to the end and
yeah,
just solve
like,
it.
You could literally just, run to Ganon and go defeat him if you want, and not even go to any of the divine beasts or whatever. You can't. It will be
it
extremely
changes your
different.
entire experience, because obviously you're missing out on story pieces.
Yeah, well,
and
even,
elements.
But
even
it's-
I played it differently than my kids. Like I did a very very step
Yeah.
to it, but then my kids like went to one section that I didn't do until like the 3/4 of the gameplay that I did, and they just went straight there, and I was like, okay then.
They're also, I mean, kids. But I mean, I feel like VR games and VR movies are going to be drastically different, and to just assume that they'd run the same is not very optimistic, because I think it is where we are headed, especially considering Disney's using it already to, film some of their stuff. I think really the only reason it's just not there yet is because not everyone can afford a VR headset, and it's
Very
just that
true.
simple.
Yeah, very true.
Because, I mean, they're literally using it to make films. I couldn't imagine how much better Ready Player One would be actually watching it in a VR headset and getting to experience all of that. Because, and then it's the same with the whole 3D argument. It's like, okay, yes, you can watch it in 3D, or you can just watch it regular without all of that effect. Okay, yes, you can watch it in VR, or you can just watch it without. Because VR gives you that depth that you were talking about that Phantom Menace recreated in 3D. Basically, you throw on some actual headset goggles, that's VR.
There's a fine line though between 3D and VR.
Exactly. Well, that's
again,
where the depth comes into, because the depth puts you into that world, and that's what VR does. VR puts you into that reality.
Because then think about Ready Player One, although it was filmed in a 3D or virtual reality world, in order for it to be a virtual reality experience for people, you would have to essentially capture everything at all times, that whole thing. So you're essentially giving them a video game to put themselves into.
In a
And
way,
that's
yeah.
not
And that's how
a
they would
movie,
have already
though.
had to film it anyways.
But that's not a movie. So again, it's a very different line between when you start branching into that, where it's so much more interactivity and so much more where it's not focused.
I think you're thinking too much into it, because it's just 3D, but with VR goggles. There's no need to be interactive with it. You just watch it,
But your
and you
focus
just
isn't-
sit on your couch with your goggles, and you're just like, oh, cool. That's so cool. Wow. Nice. And you just follow along with wherever the camera's going.
So
You
basically
don't need a full 360. It could just be 180, because then when you look over here, they could have animated freaking movie theater seats, Like, it doesn't, the entire movie doesn't need to take up the entire landscape, because that's not even how VR games work.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Honestly, the technology is moving so fast on how we are filming movies. I think also with that, how we experience movies is going to differ greatly.
Especially
as well.
with the pandemic and
Yeah.
everything going on.
Well, yeah, already, not very many people are going to movies because they've all been closed for a year. They're starting to open up now, but yet, look, you've got HBO Max, you've got Paramount Plus, you've got all these new streaming sites who are releasing movies on their platforms, while they're also being released in limited theaters now, and they're very limited theaters.
Give me some more 4D experiences, some smell-o-vision with things, all that stuff, because I think that's eventually where we're going to get to, is where you can start smelling the movies and see, like, you start getting into that, and that essentially brings it to a whole other level.
You know, like I think this is like way far out in advance, but like think of even holo technology. You could film an entire movie and then just have it all played out in holograms in just a basic room or something like that. That, yes, I know if you're a Star Trek fan, this sounds like the holodeck. I know, but that's where we're going to. Like you've got VR, you've got 3D, bringing the depth, creating the environments already. The technology is there. It's just being able to make it work on the scale that we're talking about. Still probably 3 or 4 decades away.
Yeah. And still being mainstream accessible.
Exactly. But I don't think it would take away from the artistic value that movies have always been over the last 100 years. You know, because even then, movies started on a bet. They started with a bet of 2 guys saying, "Oh, a horse brings up all 4 hooves off the ground when it gallops." No, it doesn't. So they put like 200 cameras all together and had a horse run across it, and they did a flip book. That's how movies were created.
I just think it's going to change.
We've come a long way from there, and we're going to come a long way.
Because I think your argument against VR could also be the exact same argument people had 20 years ago when 3D first came out.
And it's not necessarily against VR. I just think it's a weird level of mix because, again, think about VR now at this point. If that is the case where it's filmed in VR and all that stuff, editing jobs start going away. You have not in the same way because again
I
think people just need to be adaptable.
Change because you're not focusing attention on one thing.
Well, okay, I think you're thinking the entire industry is going to change drastically when that's not the case, because that would have been the case with 3D when it first came out, and that just wasn't the case. Like editors just adapted; they learned how to make 3D stuff. They learned how to edit in 3D.
And there's some things that have worked and some things that haven't. You know, every couple of decades, it just seems like that 3D keeps getting pushed out, and at least in the last 30 or 40 years, it just, some movies work in 3D, others don't, but it hasn't really caught on. It's not like we're experiencing every single movie with 3D.
It's going to be
same thing with VR. I think it's
going to be real pick and choosy.
It's going to be very interesting to see though, because again, think about with cinematography, especially, just this is a passion of mine, obviously. It's hard enough to think and create your environments in a 2-dimensional plane, like in front of the camera, because you have to frame everything here. But now, and the way lighting works, where you have to have a light here off camera to do it. Now you can't have that light here because if anybody can look in any direction they want, they're essentially removed right out of the movie. As soon as they see,
but this is the thing. It's never really full 360, and if it is, it's some animated thing behind you. It's never the full image 360. I feel like you're very hung up on the fact that people just look around and see whatever they want, when that's never the case. People have literally put out like $3 games on the VR or on like a VR app store, and it's like horribly like programmed, but they don't have they don't have people that are like, oh, can't see that light.
This is where the terminology, though, I think that I'm arguing is that if something takes place in a virtual reality headset, that's considered VR, but it could just be 3D, a 3D movie.
I guess
that's taking place in a VR headset.
That's what I've been saying.
This
is what I've been saying the entire time. That depth that he was talking about from Phantom Menace, that's you literally throw on goggles, and that's basically what VR is. Right. VR just creates that inward depth that you don't get from normal 3D stuff. Like when I think 3D, I think stuff being thrown at me. When I think VR, I think depth of me feeling like I'm actually in that hallway, walking down the palace.
The definition of 3D would be depth, because that's the third dimension, and then virtual reality is more interactive,
actually more in the reality.
So that's where the difference was coming into play for my head, is saying like 3D.
I mean, I feel like I made myself pretty clear when I said VR, I feel like creates depth, and 3D creates movement forward.
You went to see Star Wars and it was 3D and the depth, that's where I was going with it. So it's I still consider that three-dimensional.
I like how you're both looking at me to,
I know.
for the
Yeah.
tiebreaker.
Yeah.
I think you're.
I'm not
I think
looking
you're
for a
both right.
tiebreaker.
No, I'm kidding.
Look, this is my thing. I've worked in VR. I
Yeah.
know how it works. It really is just 3D in $500 goggles.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about it. If a video game is in VR, that video game is also CGI. So you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
The game is also animated, but there's also games out there where they're not animated. They're 2D, but they're still VR. It's still a possibility.
Yeah. So
It's not going to change
it's gonna
movies
be-
drastically. I think it would make them better. I would love to see the new Avatar movie that's going to be coming out in VR versus 3D, to be honest.
Well, according to James Cameron, there's another 5 coming out. So
So I'm going to have to wait another 20 years.
yeah, exactly. So
Well, it'll be there by then.
and by that time, he would digitally download his mind into
Into a computer.
into a computer,
Into a VR headset.
Into a VR headset.
Demolition Man with the headset.
Yes,
so you can-
exactly.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like the future of filmmaking and of 3D, of VR, of holo technology, we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting. We've got some great technology already out now, and the future is ahead of us, and I can't wait to see what comes from it. So, but until then, keep vibing.
Bye.
Hey, I hope you liked that episode, and if you did, make sure to click the like below and subscribe to the channel for more episodes coming every single Friday. Plus, we're working on some more content for this year, so you don't want to miss that as well. So like, comment, etc., below. Also, comment on below to let us know what you think about the future of filmmaking. Let us know what your thoughts about what the presence of VR when it comes to filmmaking, the 3D aspects, the video walls, etc. All this new technology, and let us know what some of your favorite technology is. Something that we didn't cover that we can cover into a future episode. Let us know in the comments below. That's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and until then, keep creating, build your brand, and go out there and tell your story.